everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Crystal Maury, and I'm the curator here at the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery. And tonight our subject is time.
For me, I guess that in thinking about time and music is, I think, as composers and musicians, we work a lot with subjective cues, and there's a way of actually getting into a person's psyche and working with a sense of time. And this, I think in music perhaps, all of the time-based arts do this. Music perhaps the most, because it's of the most abstract of the arts. There are less distractions. You can deal in a very direct way with people's sense of time. The interesting thing with the intersection of clock time is that, as composers, we're told, we want a piece that's 15 minutes long. But our reaction to it is we want to create a whole subjective world that has nothing to do with the clock. And then how you do that as a composer is, that's what we do. And I think one thing that's very interesting about composition is that we like to have a sense of more of a gestalt feel of time. We like to feel what that 15 minutes experience is like. And when you're looking at a project, you will then have a sense of what it feels like after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, not in terms of the clock, but in terms of the proportions of your piece. And one of my obsessions, and this comes back to a very real connection to clock time, has had to do with durational proportions. And so as a composer, I've been very interested in the relationship of how long something is, whatever it is, to something else.
I'm not exactly sure how to begin because there's so many ways into speaking about time. I guess the thing that most emotionally I feel about it is how strange it is how long it takes to write a book. Like, I remember being a teenager or something and hearing that it took James Joyce 10 years to write Ulysses, and I thought that was like this superhuman kind of thing to do. But it does take me 5 or 6 years to write a book, and it's not superhuman. It's just like it takes a really long time. And one of the weird things about, I guess, I'm not sure if this is the same with writing music, but with writing a novel, you're writing from a specific point of view, and in some ways you have to stick with that point of view throughout the entire writing of it. You can't change. And I think we're always changing a lot, but in some ways when you're writing a book, you have to stay the same person you were when you started it for the duration of the creation of it, or else you'll just write it forever. And then, so I've discovered, because I've written a few books, I've discovered that when you do finish the book, then the change that was supposed to happen gradually over the 5 years happens in a month, and then your whole life kind of falls apart because that's very unnatural for all that change that should happen over 6 years to happen in a month. There is something about that ambition that this work of art will last through all time, and more to the point, will mean the same thing in the future that it means now, which is even more absurd because the future will have completely different symbols and ways of looking at things. But there is some way that I think those two things have to go together. I can't imagine anyone making a work of art that they don't in some way hope will last for all of time, go into the future, in some ways will even go back in time. And I think that I'm not exactly sure why that is. I don't think it has to do with any kind of arrogance or ego. I think it's something even deeper than that. I think it's the reason that you're making a work of art is because you want to add to the natural world in some way. You want to add something natural to the natural world. You want to add another rock. And I feel like that's the reason maybe that one has that kind of ambition, because if you can actually make something that lasts for all of time, that means that you have made something as natural as water or as natural as a rock. I was commissioned to write a story that took place in a near future, so I think it was like 2020 or something. What year are we in? 2011? Yeah, 2025 or something like that. And the idea in the story was that people would input their whole entire lives into their BlackBerries, and the BlackBerry would be able to calculate the likelihood of one outcome versus another based on things that had happened in the past. So it would just know you, and it could kind of predict the future. And I think that what excited me about that idea is because I think there's one way of living which is living in terms of probability. Like, so you think, well, the likelihood of me doing this will likely end up in this way, and that seems to me a very mechanical way of going about life. And that's the way that I had all these people in the story decide to go about life. As a culture, everyone sort of went in that direction, sort of computational, analysis of likely outcomes. And then I didn't, this wasn't in that story, but I think to me the opposite of that is living in terms of instinct. And I wonder what relationship instinct has to time. Is instinct the collection of all our past experiences? Is it kind of a visceral knowledge based on what's happened, or is it something completely other? I have no idea what it is, but often I get flashes of what's going to happen in the future, or this kind of thing, which makes me do sometimes feel like that there is actually a future that already exists that you can sometimes have access to in these little moments of insight. Of course, that is completely the opposite of what Lee thinks, which is that there is absolutely no future yet, and that it will be only once we make decisions and get there. But I think that I don't know if I agree with that. I think that may be so, but I also have sometimes a strong feeling that in fact the future is already there, and you can kind of get glimpses of it, and that time is a lot more complicated than us moving forward into a future that doesn't exist.
One of the things that science has persistently done is discover that things are not what they seem to be. Matter appears to be smooth, the air appears to be smooth, water appears to be smooth and continuous, but it turns out that matter is entirely made of atoms. So there's a discreteness. Okay? Things are not what they appear to be. The world is filled with light, and light is sometimes like a wave and sometimes like a particle. So the world is not what it appears to be. We get this message continually from science. And then we come to the conception of time. And people like Julian Barber and also Einstein and so forth are telling us the world is not what it appears to be with respect to time. And there's a lot of this message going on now in popular science, not just Julian Barber, who's the best of them, but a lot of my colleagues are on a campaign to convince all of us that time is not real, that time is an illusion, that a real way of seeing the world is somehow four-dimensional. The whole history of the universe exists as one. This is called the block universe picture. There's no notion of the present. There's no notion of the present moment or any of the things that Peter talked about, the experience of time. There's no notion of that in the physicist's conception of nature. We're told that time is really an illusion because for some strange psychological reason, we don't see the world, we don't see the whole history of the world as one. We see it, unfortunately, bit by bit by bit as it flows. Einstein was ambivalent about this. There's a famous letter he wrote to the widow of one of his best friends just after his friend's death, which is often quoted, in which he said that we scientists and philosophers know that time is not real, and therefore life and death, the distinction between them is not real. If we exist, we always exist in a timeless sense. Why this was supposed to be solace to his widow is never explained. But it's often quoted. But there's another quotation from Einstein, less well known, in which which is in the autobiography of a philosopher, a logical positivist, Rudolf Carnap, in which he complains that Einstein and he went drinking together, and Einstein worried about the disappearance of the concept of the now in physics. He was upset that there is no way to locate the now in the physicist's conception of nature. That is, everything that Peter talked about, the experience that we experience the world as a moment, which is one of the succession of moments. And the point of view that I've come to after signing on, I mean, I originally signed on to the timeless point of view. The timeless point of view is a wonderful inspiration for a teenager to go into science, because this conception that you can transcend the ugliness of life and transcend to this perfection where everything is true, is always true, and there's perfect beauty and timeless and everything. And that's what we can come back to discuss, if that's really what artists want to do. And so I was seduced by that. But over the last 10 years or so, I've come to switch entirely to the point of view where I think that time is the only thing that we experience which is as it seems to be. That is, to try to think of a scientific conception of the world in which the world, anything that's true or that's real in the world, is true or real in a moment, which is one of a succession of moments. And the experience of time as a flow or succession of moments is because the world exists as a flow or a succession of moments. To me, whether a piece of art exists forever, it exists for a long time, but the thing that is wonderful about art, as in that art somehow crystallizes, although it's true in many of the domains that human beings act, is that we are able to do something in a focused way that nature does from time to time, which is invent novelty and discover genuine novelty. So a work of art, if it's a good work of art, and I'm saying this to be provocative, is something which genuinely has not existed before and could not somehow have been conceived before. That is, could not have been predicted based on anybody's knowledge, except the person who went through those 10 years of work to somehow create that.